History Month. And we are... I'm going to try to start off with some super chats, guys. We're live. It is 9 a.m. here in Los Angeles. And let me read a few super chats while we get connected. I have a guest coming today. Terry bought our coffee. It's Friday the 5th of July, AD 2024, guys. It should be live on all platforms, hopefully. Oh, let me click my IG. See if I can get going on IG. But Terry bought our coffee. Thanks for talking me through the conversation about crime and poverty. It was helpful in sharpening my understanding. I'm sad you're not taking me on a date, but I'll treat you to a coffee anyways. Happy Independence Day. Coffee emoji. That's kind. Thank you, Terry. Carver bought our coffee. Thank you for the report, Mr. Hake. Although we have yet to confirm any direct connection to the terror cell, we do have substantial evidence of the subject's failure to pick up after his dog and will be acting promptly. Whoa. Whoa. Sounds familiar. Sam R. says, over on punchy.tv/Hake, we're just reading a few super chats, guys, before we get started. Dylan Burns is going to be coming up very shortly here. We will take your calls as well, Dylan Burns. But Sam R. said, I really like when Denny calls. It's Denny from Bulgaria. He's really smart. Smartest Bulgarian on this side of heaven. Could be. He's the only Bulgarian I know. Indeed. And Sam R. says, I heard that Taiwan is more Chinese than China because they didn't destroy all their past history and culture from the Communist Revolution. I don't know for sure, though. Interesting. I had not heard that. But that could really make sense, Sam R. Nice. Some quick super chats before we get going with Dylan Burns. Lin Yen Chin says, intuition. It's just intent, but used as a means of observation. It's the steady state where rhythm of heart regularly surges out. It bears each beat a shock-like pulse. Intuition is blending heart rate into the environment, a feeling of feedback at moment of pulse as the heart surges out waves. Surges out waves of attention to one's situation. Breathe into stillness as your spine undulates in refresh rates that each heartbeat etches. Let me just double check on my Twitter here. Interesting, man. Interesting, Lin Yen Chin. Breathe into stillness as your spine undulates in refresh rates that each heartbeat etches. Okay. It's good to be in touch with reality, and part of, your body's in a reality. Come back to the present. Nice, Lin Yen Chin. Gregatron says we need to get Frederick, William, Mark, and Big Bump on the same panel for an epic White History Month conversation since y'all live in Cali, CA. It can be the season finale of the Hake Report. Hake, let all hell break loose. Let the beast out. Interesting suggestion, man. Very interesting. And Ego Israel sent me a tip saying, what in the fresh heck is this? Don't say that word too much, kids. BET... clip, BET Awards 2024, Taraji P. Henson gets Kamala Harris on the phone, and he asks, what is bison? B-I-S-O-N, all caps. Black, Indian, slave owner, orangutan, nobody? Is it a replacement for BIPOC? Maybe you and Big Bump can sort this out, he says. Interesting. I don't know, Ego Israel. I'll have to check that out. Thank you for the tip. A lot of times you guys send me tips, and I appreciate it. While we see about getting connected with Dylan Burns, I would like to check on Matthew from California. I don't normally take the biblical question. If he's desperately wanted to talk to me about the biblical question, go for it. But I don't normally talk to the callers about the biblical question because that's for the JLP show and for church with Jesse Lee Peterson. And it's not guaranteed that JLP is hearing. Bison is the mascot for Howard University, which is that black college. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Before I get to calls, let's do the intro while we get ready. I think Dylan Burns is joining me. I've halfway stood him up for half an hour, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's returning the favor. Not on purpose, but something came up. All right? Dylan Burns. You guys know and love Dylan Burns. Yeah, he's like 24 or something like that. Very knowledgeable, precocious young man. But anyway, guys, let's just get right on with the show. Not exactly. That's what we need. The silent prayer. Splash screen.
Oh, it's the Hake Report. The Hake Report. La la la. Oh, it's the Hake Report. The Hake Report. La la la.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the AJ Gallardo original theme song. We were having a loosey-goosey Friday show. Lin Yen Chin is asking so nicely for me to unmod him. I will remove him as a standard moderator so that he doesn't have to see.
Oh, it's the Hake Report.
Come on, man.
The Hake Report. La la la. Oh, it's the Hake Report. The Hake Report. La la la.
So, how you guys doing? I am fine. I have a nice little white shirt on. It's not full-blown. It's not Anglo white. It's that white. But I'm not going to promote that. But that's what that is. Won't tell you where I got it, which is telling you where I got it. Think he lost power. Oh, okay. Is that Danabo mentioning that? Okay. Yeah, Dylan Burns, he is in the thick of it. He is in the thick of it. So we'll connect when he's ready. No prob. No prob. In the meantime, guys, hope you're having a nice one. What is up, everybody? Bond crew, Rumble crew. Let me go check Punchy TV, punchy.tv. Before I connect with my callers. I have a Hayden in Texas is on the line here. Let me get to Hayden in Texas. Hayden, thank you for calling, man. What is up?
What's going on, James?
Not much. How about you?
Not much. This is my first time calling you in my car, so this is going to be kind of weird.
Okay, well, you sound fine so far.
Oh, good. That's great. That's great news.
Yeah.
I called in on Jesse's show. Of course, he didn't pick up because his audience, he has so many callers and stuff.
Yeah.
But it bugs me so much to hear him say that the country's not coming back. The amount of have you seen Trump's polls in each state?
No, I haven't. I've heard that he's looking pretty good. Yeah, but I haven't really kept up with any of that.
No, he's doing he's up in New Jersey. He's up in Michigan, Wisconsin, Rhode Island even. He's up in all these states. And the majority of states that I know of are electing Republican governors, senates, all sorts of stuff. And I'm seeing a bunch of the thing about Charlottesville and stuff, people tearing down monuments and stuff.
Right.
That stuff's only temporary. And I don't know if you know this or not. Do you know who Kevin Roberts is? Do you know who that name is? He's part of the Heritage Foundation.
Oh, no, I don't. But I've heard of Heritage Foundation.
Yeah, he's the president.
Okay.
I'm not going to say quite a lot on my end and what I know, but what he said 2 days ago on the news was pretty spot on. If you're into the kind of stuff, for pro-America and stuff, you should really check out what he said on. I forget the network exactly. I probably shouldn't even say that on your show.
Right.
the network name, but I have all sorts of hope. it's not just because I'm an optimist. I'm an optimistic person. It's showing everywhere throughout the country. I mean, the MAGA movement is just growing like crazy. Liberals are waking up to the lie that's been fed to them. The debate itself showed that last week, that they've been lying to the country. So it really bugs me when Jesse says that to his audience, that I know is it's getting so large now, both you and his audiences. So I just wanted to address that.
JLP talking about the country being over, I honestly agree with him. Even if Trump wins again, even if he gets the wall completed and people, quote unquote, wake up, I have to be a bit dismissive about waking up, the notion of waking up, because a lot of us have, quote unquote, waken up, but we're still lost when it comes down, when push comes to shove. We're still not in perfect peace. And there's, and when you don't have that, you just have people changing enemies. Right now, there's a lot of liberals who think conservatives are the enemy. And then there's a lot of conservatives who think liberals are the enemy. Or there's whites who think Jews are the enemy, or whatever. But when you have personal enemies, or racial enemies, or whatever type of enemies, and you're not fighting the evil inside, you're not watching and overcoming the world inside of yourself and the evil inside of yourself, then evil's going to win, even still, you know? That's why he doesn't see it coming back, because there's more than ever, we have people into pot, into victimhood, including the men and the whites and the incels and all them, and big towels. And so the signs are there that it's still really bad, even if there is an awakening to some facts that have been suppressed big time.
Oh yeah, it's definitely gonna take some time, you know, because I mean,
it's nice to be. It's nice not to be. It's good not to be down about it, but it's interesting that it bothers you that Jesse says that. If it bothers you that he says that, then it sounds like it means that you don't really have the full faith that it will get better. You don't know either.
No, it just it annoys me that he's I love Jesse still, obviously.
Yeah, right.
But
I know
that. Yeah, he but I guess it just hurts me that he doesn't have hope in the country. Listen, I know it's gonna take a long time to get this country back in order. I'm not naive to that whatsoever.
Nice.
But I guess it just hurts me to see that he doesn't see it coming back, because I mean the world he lived in when he was younger stuff is different from what it is now. Big time. So
worse, much. So it's now much worse than it was when he was growing up.
Yeah, I would say times 10.
Yeah.
When you say so?
I would say so too. Yeah, times 10.
Yeah. Yeah, absolute mess.
It's amazing how much I've seen the decline in my lifetime of watching things.
Yep.
From when I was like, say, 5, 6, 12, 15, 20 to today. It's gotten more and more out of control. And people can attribute to different points. Obama, amnesty, different amnesties under Reagan and others. The gay agenda, don't ask, don't tell, was instituted by Clinton, allowing the gays to be in the military. Yep. We just won't ask you. And then Obama repealing it and saying, yo, you can be out in the open in the military now. And then he brought in transgenders in the military. And so it's just all gone out of control. And you saying them tearing down the monuments is a temporary thing. It may be, but it's not as if the hate is going away, because they're hateful, tearing down our monuments. And then a lot of us are hating them back. And that's just darkness.
You're right.
And JLP is not sad about America being gone. I mean, but you're sad for Jesse saying that it's gone. You know? There's something emotional in there that's not right.
I guess I'm disappointed because, and I'm driving past a bunch of these American flags.
Yeah.
To my right, which is it's just amazing. It shows everyone's waking up.
But that's Texas.
But
it doesn't show everybody waking up. You know.
It is, but I mean, you see the whole Senate thing with Ted Cruz. And I forget that other black guy's name. Ted Cruz is in the battle right now. So I mean, this is absolutely crazy. There's a huge. I don't want to get distracted, but I mean, there's a huge American flag going to my right now. It's just amazing.
Cool.
But yeah. I guess I'm just because I mean, Jesse shows that he has common sense, that he sees things so clearly and stuff. I guess I'm just disappointed that he doesn't see it. I see it so clear. I mean, everyone is just American pride is just showing everywhere, and it is just absolutely amazing to see. And I like to point out the whole monument tearing thing, tearing down thing, has been happening under the quote unquote Biden administration
and Obama.
Obama, I call it Biden administration.
Yeah.
So this is just temporary. There's no doubt in my mind about that whatsoever. American pride is on a whole other level right now, and I'm a little shaky talking right now because I'm driving and I'm trying to focus on the road and stuff.
Yeah. Nice.
But I'll probably call it on Monday and finish up my thoughts on it. But I just want to call in and say American pride is on a whole other level compared to 2020. We were just used to greatness when Trump was in office in 2020, and I guess they just left our hands, and the left just got their way.
I'm kind of happy it went the way that it did. Not that I'm happy about. I'm not gleeful that the January 6ers and other patriots are in jail and prison and persecuted and stuff. But it's kind of nice to see. It's nice to see evil. It's interesting to see evil out in the open.
Failing now.
I don't know if it's failing, but it's out in the open. And I remember I was mad when Obama got reelected. And then later I'm like, you know what? I'm glad it went the way it did. So just always be cool with whatever is.
Yeah.
So whether Trump gets reelected or not, be happy. Be happy. Stay cool.
Yeah. Again, for your audience, check out Kevin Roberts, what he said 2 days ago. I'm probably not allowed to say it on the air, but it's what I've been saying every single time I call in, pretty much.
It's good to be encouraging to the people.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to just think, oh no, what's the point in voting? Because if everybody says what's the point in voting, I don't hold it against the people who've called me and said, oh, I don't see the point in voting, depending on where they are. But if the more people think like that, the more that it won't matter. And it's an assumption, in my opinion, to say that it doesn't matter at all. I think it matters a little, and I think it makes a little bit of a difference. High propensity voters generally are higher quality people. And I know that there's people who don't vote at all, but even those people who don't vote at all, if they examine that comment, they may agree with me, because there are like Tea Partiers and boomers who still love the country, and then younger people like you and me who would make an effort to vote in an election that we care about. And those people, the people who would take the trouble, the voting is supposed to be a little bit hard, a little bit of a pain. It's not supposed to be so convenient. They're making it too convenient for every idiot to vote, in my opinion. I want voter suppression so that only the high propensity voters get through, the ones who really care. And I know that there's a whole lot of evil people who care too. I'm about to talk to one of them, Dylan Burns. My opinion, he's
he a Democrat?
He's a patriotic Democrat, but he's a patriotic one, but he's a Democrat, and he's for everything evil, practically.
Yeah.
And I want to ask him to, if he and his ilk take power, go easy on us in the gulags when they put us in the gulags. Make the gulags somewhat comfortable.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Don't be surprised if he shows up with a mask on in 2024.
That's funny, man. Thank you, Hayden in Texas. I wish you well, man.
Yeah, I'll call it on Monday. Happy White Issue Month, Hake.
You too. Have a great weekend. Be careful.
You too.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Wow. So Dylan Burns lost power, it looked like, according to what I'm hearing. Let's see here. Bum, bum, bum. Personal loan. I ignore all calls, practically, FYI. Okay. Anyway, boy, did you already check on Matthew from California? Because I'm not sure I really want to deal with the biblical question. Check on him for me out there, Derek, or phone answer. Thank you. Starkey's a first-time caller in Charlotte, North Carolina. Starkey, is this...
Hey.
Hey. How you doing, man? Is it Starkey, S-T...
Man, I'm absolutely awesome.
S as in Sam, T as in Tom, A-R-K-E-Y? Starkey?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like Ringo Starr, but he was a Starkey, so like Ringo Starkey.
Okay, nice.
I'm not as cool as him, but...
Well, that's all right. What's up, man?
So I was calling to hit you up on the Trump situation. So my favorite, most entertaining president so far since Ronald Reagan. I'm a little older, so.
Nice. Right on. You a Gen Xer?
The issue that yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm 42 years old.
Sweet.
Yeah,
Same.
so the issue that I've been having with the situation is it seems to me like our man's got like this Job complex. And I'd hope to say that, we're heading towards that, like in the Bible, the Job story where there was the victory in the end, but I'm not sure about that. But it looks to me like the man keeps taking hits. And if they were just normal hits, like fair hits, but supposedly he's getting cheated. Like the last...
Cheated in that they're going after him with these politically motivated attacks in the courts. Is that what you mean by cheated?
Well, so much more than that, all the way back to...
I don't want to say that the election was cheated at all, just for the sake of my channel.
I'm not saying that...
Okay. All right,
I'm
good.
not saying the election was cheated or wasn't cheated, but
yeah,
I'm
me
saying
neither.
Trump's saying it was cheated.
I like that Trump says that. When you say Job complex, even though I disavow the big lie, but when you say Job complex, do you think that he's feeling like a victim? Because Job was
he's feeling like a victim. I'm not sure that it's 100% the exact same situation, but the portion of the situation I would compare him to Job, to be clear about it, is where he keeps getting these attacks, even though he's doing the right thing.
Oh,
he keeps getting this evil bombardment.
Right.
So I'm not 100% overlaying the two things, just specifically that part of it.
Okay, yeah. And
to get back to it, the guy definitely says he was cheated, and he definitely says that he believes that he got more votes. He definitely...
I don't want to even repeat what he says, though, man, just for the sake of my channel.
No, I get it.
As a fellow Gen Xer, YouTube wants to shut down that content, and I don't blame him because this election was perfect. It was the most secure in history. So I don't even want to repeat his big lie. But I like that he says it.
I'll bounce
So don't.
Yeah, I'll bounce.
Just don't even say. Don't even repeat those words for my sake, please.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. I get it. I understand.
Yeah.
So I'll bounce around that. But the situation that we both understand is that supposedly he's been taking these licks, and they're not licks like normal ones. So, for example, if you come in my house and we're playing Monopoly, and Hake beats me at Monopoly fair and square, I'm not going to like it. I'm going to be like, Hake, you suck. You came in my house and you beat me at Monopoly. But if you come in my house and you beat me at Monopoly and you do it some other way than the normal way, then that defeat to me is worse. So now let's say I got a team of people behind me, and they're like, they got my back. They, no matter what, they know I'm playing a clean, fair game, a clean game of Monopoly.
Yeah.
And they know that what you're doing is something different then. So let's just say it like that. Well, at what point does my team see me playing these games, and no matter how good I am and how cardinal rule I'm playing that game, I keep taking those licks. When is that team going to be like, you know, maybe this guy's not able to fight against that?
Oh. I don't know, and I don't really care because I'm watching Trump. I'm not even watching him that closely, but every time that I check in on him, when I see, like, I don't check in on him, but I check out a video of his or see a little clip or story, he is unmoved. You know, he still has his spirits up. So that's great. It's nice to see. It's encouraging. And so I'm not worried about it.
Yes, see, I agree with
honestly,
you 100% on that side of it.
And honestly, the attacks on him are because he's doing it right. You know, he's keeping his chin up like a king should, and he has a good attitude and loves everybody like a king should. All of his subjects. Some of his subjects are rebelling against him, but he's still a king. He's still a child of the king or a brother of the king. If Christ is king, he's the king's brother. He's a prince. He's royalty.
I agree with that 100%. When I look at him and every time he responds to anything, like I said, he's the most entertaining president I've ever seen.
Yeah.
His rebuttals, the way he comes back, and the way, man, it's like you can hit him in the chest with bullets, and the man just keeps walking towards you.
Indeed.
I too enjoy that, and
yeah,
I mean, it's hard not to respect it.
For
I do respect that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, whenever I see the way the situation went down in the beginning, the first situation, and I see one person sitting in the basement acting like he don't even care. He's not even worried.
Yeah.
And then and me personally, what I do is I like to do a lot of self-education as much as available. So I'm like going to every single website that either one of them talk on.
Oh.
And I'm seeing our favorite president get millions of more responses, likes, loves, and I'm seeing the other guy getting like nothing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I remember
what people were seeing.
You know, you reminded me of when they got rid of the dislikes. That was after 2020, right? Something like that. They got rid of the dislikes on YouTube.
That, but
yeah, because Biden would get so many dislikes on every single YouTube video from the White House and everything else, I think it was after he was in the White House. He was getting mass dislikes. And so they got rid of, and I like seeing dislikes on my videos and everybody else's videos. Right now I see one like on my video, which doesn't mean that maybe there's more likes than I see at this point. But I like seeing the dislikes, but Mama YouTube wants to get rid of that. So you're right. He is a very low-rated politician at this point. Sleepy Joe.
Yeah, so when I was watching the videos, I would go to like the YouTube videos and a lot of the Facebook videos, and like not only would he get much more dislikes, but he would have hundreds of thousands of less followers,
right,
and hundreds of thousands of less views. So this is my point, is when a man like that, it reminds me of like my grandpa used to call the slot machine the one-armed bandit that backs up against the wall. And he used to say, hey, man, you got to watch out for the one-armed bandit.
That's funny.
Because it'll back up to the wall and keep its mouth shut and take on all comers.
Wow.
So it's up to deviousness and no good, and it knows it's going to win, and it don't care. It ain't got to talk about it.
Okay.
You see, so that's what worries me. And then we start building faith, and everybody's like, have faith in Trump, have faith in Trump. Well, then I'm saying maybe we might be ignoring the devious capability of this one-armed bandit.
Fair enough. Yep, exactly. I think Trump even said it, or somebody said it, never underestimate your opponent or enemy or any situation. Don't think, oh, I got it in the bag. Don't be resting on your laurels just because seems like a joke. Yeah, I think that's many of people have gone up against Sleepy Joe, who's actually formidable.
Yeah,
Or he used to be,
that's
definitely.
What I'm wondering is I know that Trump is super smart, right? We all get it.
Yeah.
So what's he doing about that? And why aren't more people talking about it? Because that's like 4 or 5 layers deep. You
True.
know, so a lot of people aren't getting that deep. So
I'll
when
tell
they're
you.
not getting that deep, and it's that hard to even explain, how are people even recognizing it in order to combat it?
Don't have an expectation either way. That's one way to combat it. American Anchor Baby has pointed out that there's people who they hate Trump that much that they will vote against him no matter who it is, or they feel sorry for, or feel even good feelings toward Crooked Joe, Sleepy Joe, or even whoever may replace him. And so they will hype up a lot of votes that way. The country is quite clearly divided, quite closely divided, meaning it really could go either way. Either way would not surprise me, you know? But it's not.
Yeah, so when go ahead.
It is an important election, and it may be the most important. Every election they say, oh, it's the most important, and maybe it is. The most important one is the current one.
Election's the most important.
But now is what's important. Not even, the election is in the future. We don't have to. Our local lives are important, and we ignore our lives worrying about the president and fighting over that.
I'm mostly interested in this second.
Say again?
I'm mostly interested in this second and this spot.
Yeah, good.
Mostly what I can see right now.
Yeah.
So I agree.
It's fun talking with you, Starkey, in Charlotte, North Carolina. Call me again, man.
Hey, man, Hake, it was good talking to you. You have a good day, sir.
You as well. Nice.
Bye.
Bye. Jimmy in Minnesota on the line here. We're going to plow through a bunch of calls to see what we can do. Maybe it was fake news, my title. Jimmy in Minnesota, thanks for calling and holding there, man. What's up?
Hey, how's it going, Hake?
Oh, hi. Did you?
Yeah.
What do I call you?
Hey, you might as well call me Jimmy because it's easier to pronounce.
But I know Jaime.
Yeah.
Am I pronouncing Jaime correctly?
You are, yeah.
Do you prefer I call you Jimmy?
Yeah, we can just go by Jimmy, and then that way everybody knows how to pronounce it.
Okay, I'll call you Jimmy, Jimmy, formerly known as Jaime.
There you go.
Cool.
Hey, so I was thinking about that 1776, that title you got on there, and I believe that was the last greatest American Revolution, or the American, when America was the most American.
Oh.
And everything was downhill from there.
Okay.
George Washington, the greatest president ever. That's when America was truly America.
Yeah.
So conservative, God-fearing, and none of this communism, Marxism stuff. None. Zero. Zilch.
Are you sure?
Pretty sure.
Okay. You might be right.
There's no...
I feel like there was communism with us, or at least the evil, the mama spirit early on. Very early on.
Right, yeah. So right after that revolution, it started coming.
Okay. Right after the American Revolution. Well, man, I heard the French helped us. And the French Revolution was not pretty. They were chopping off heads, And
well, what I mean by that is, with what Jesse and other people say is, that America's not coming back. It isn't. Not with 1 or 2 terms of presidency. It's going to take 3 or 4 generations of people to go back to, what it was like.
Yeah.
So we're not going to see it. And these little wins and little losses, they're nothing. Trump goes to jail.
Right.
It's no big deal. It's
True.
Nothing. It's a small thing. Don't look at it like it's a big thing, because it ain't.
I know. They just like to have their little headline and a note on Wikipedia. Shout out to Wikipedia. And shout out to the headlines. But they're not important. It's true.
Or if Trump gets immunity on some things, it's small. It's not a big thing in the big picture.
Yep.
You can take a look at the small picture, what's around you, but don't forget about the big picture.
And what is the big picture again?
The big picture is that America is great again.
Oh, okay.
You
think so, huh?
Yeah, you know, 100 years from now, 300 years from now, that's the big picture.
Oh, but that doesn't do us any good. I think we better work on ourselves. Otherwise, we're going to stay in our hells,
yeah,
you know?
that's the part that we need to take care of, is
Yeah.
ourselves. But remember, we're doing that for a bigger picture.
Yeah.
So that, you know, if we have kids, then we train our kids in that way. Now, the correct way is the godly way, right? That's going to make you live longer and happier. Even if we go to the gulag,
Yeah.
we're going to be happy there.
Uh-huh.
You know, but the Marxists, communists, they're never happy. Not even if they're on their plush little pillows drinking margaritas all day.
Yeah.
They're never going to be happy.
Right, because that's why they're drinking
that
margaritas all day.
And they train their kids that way, and their kids are never happy.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth, and they, you know, kind of die off.
Yeah, true.
So it's a generation thing. It's going to take, you know, 4 or 5 generations. 6, if you're lucky.
Well, I mean, we'll see. I think that in the Bible, it was written about how the Israelites did well for a time, and then did really bad. Started to do well for a time, and then did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And it was always like an up and down. Nothing was, and it changed from king to king, from generation to generation, and kind of interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah, and, you know, it talked about the general Israel, but I'm sure there's pockets of Israelites in there that were always...
Definitely.
You know,
oh, yeah.
always good.
Yeah, right. There's always some people who are really of the light.
Right. So the other question I had, because I didn't understand, the Supreme Court said that Trump is immune on some things, but the states have to decide what he is immune on?
No, the lower courts have to decide what actions are official and what actions are private.
So that's the courts that he's already embattled in.
Oh, there's a new group on Discord. There's a new group on Discord, Hassan. If you go check on the Discord groups, then you can do that. Pardon my interruption, man. We're trying to connect with Dylan Burns. What did you say? What did you just say? I got distracted.
The Supreme Court said that Trump is immune, does have immunity, but you said the lower courts, not the state courts, the lower courts have to decide what that means?
Right. The lower courts have to decide what's official actions that are immune and what's the unofficial actions that are not immune.
Are those the lower courts that these charges have been brought into? Or
I have no idea.
Because if it's to the decision of the courts that are against him, that's not good.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. But it's definitely going to be tougher. It's definitely going to be tougher and more complicated for them to go after him the way that they've been doing it. So we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But like you said, these are small things.
Happy White History Month, and I look forward to listening about Dylan Burns.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Take care. So do you see Dylan Burns in there? No, he's giving a no. Let me check over there. You do see him? Let me give me a second. Can you play like a song or something? Can you check in the Discord? He said he made a new group. Pardon us. We're doing stuff. We're trying to get Dylan Burns 1776 on the show, and I think we're going to be able to do it, okay? Dylan Burns TV is his YouTube channel. He's Dylan Burns TV on X, as well as Dylan Burns 1776. Let me show you let me post his links. He's on YouTube, on X, on Twitch. He's on Linktree, linktr.ee/Dylan Burns TV. And indeed, there he is. We're going to make it happen, I think. Dylan Burns, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. How you doing, Hank?
Doing well. And chat, press 1 if you can hear him. If you can hear Dylan Burns, just to make sure that it is indeed going out. Welcome to the show, man. I'm glad you were able to connect, finally.
Happy to be back. Sorry, in Ukraine we have these rolling blackouts.
Oh,
Power
yeah.
be out half the day, and then it'll come on. And they try to schedule it, and they have a schedule, but sometimes due to either overuse or other problems or a new Russian strike, uh, you lose power, and so I couldn't connect. I'm sorry about that.
No worries, man. Hey, it happens. I've stood you up for half an hour on end before too, and I was thinking, oh man, this stuff happens. I understand. So you're in Ukraine again / still working on documentary after documentary, or what's going on?
Yeah, well, this morning, to be clear, I just got told by my friend off screen, the closest power generation to us right now got hit. So
Oh,
that's
wow.
probably the reason why the power is out. I didn't know the specific reason, but that's why he just told me.
Okay.
But yeah, we're working on documentaries. We have a piece that's going to be releasing probably in the next 72 hours, where we were with Ukrainian forces on a BMP on a fire mission on Russian positions in the Luhansk region. That's a region that only 2% of is still left unoccupied by the Russians. And so we went into the Srebrenicki forest on a fire mission. There's been a lot of fighting over there, and I wanted to see how the BMPs work, because BMPs get not a lot of coverage. They're these very thinly armored vehicles with a cannon on top that's just meant to transport troops in a mechanized assault. But they've been turned into like the armored spine of both armies, where they're going on indirect fire missions, they're transporting troops, and there's tons of them from old Soviet stockpiles. So I wanted to work with, sorry, there's a dog in the background going crazy.
Nice.
I wanted to document soldiers that don't get documented that often, because it's usually tanks or jets or the flashy weapons that get all the coverage. I also got a documentary coming out on an evacuation worker who got a lot of people out of Mariupol. We went with him to the frontline city of Chasiv Yar as he was trying to convince the people who are staying behind to leave as the Russian army got closer. And I got a documentary on drone warfare coming out in the near future, as well as I went with drone teams all across the country, FPV teams otherwise on the Volchansk axis to film. And I've got a medical documentary coming out about people doing surgery on injured soldiers and, the impact on the psychological health and whatnot. So I'm working on a lot of projects right now, but yeah, I'm filming a lot.
Right on, man. That's cool. I respect it a lot. I'm just curious what your shirt says, if it's something pertinent or if it's something
Oh no,
impertinent.
it's I honestly forget what this says. It's I buy shirts off the rack just to have shirts. A lot of
Nice.
times I'll go out for 2 days, I'll pack 3 days clothing, and then it'll end up being 5 days, because we just get so much, because we go to one place, we film, and they're like, hey, we got this other thing going on, do you want to come with us with that? I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a great opportunity. And so a lot of clothes we just buy off the rack. So I just bought this
right
off the
on.
rack. It means nothing.
Fair enough. Well, pro tip,
Mhm.
cotton is re-wearable and wool is also re-wearable. It doesn't stink as much as polyester. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've noticed.
In my experience, I can wear most of my clothing more than once.
Yeah, for sure. That's cool. You know what? You are, when I think of patriotism, and these young patriotic people, although you are a liberal and I've called you like a communist useful idiot and all this stuff, because I think you're pretty liberal, right? You're liberal?
Yeah, I'm a pretty liberal guy.
I think of you as patriotic. Like, I don't know. I've known some patriotic liberals. Like, I think Seth Rich was probably patriotic. I saw him in like American flag gear. Maybe it was just garish. He was being silly, but we've heard of Seth Rich. I'm sure.
It was it was a 4th of July celebration. I think I know the picture you're talking about. Also, happy belated 4th of July.
Yeah, happy 4th of July. I'm kind of glad that I had you on, because your username on Twitter, your main username on your main X account is Dylan Burns 1776. So
Yes, I chose it. I don't know, when I was like maybe 17 or 18, but I liked it. I was like, what's some numbers I'll always remember, because I forget like long number codes all the time, and so I was like, I just use historical dates for all my stuff.
Yeah.
And so 1776 was like, okay, that's an easy one, and I love America, USA, whatnot.
yeah. So you were away from America for the 4th of July.
I was, but I gotta say, I was wished happy 4th of July multiple times.
Nice.
While I was here, there were very, very nice people, and the government had like a few like put out some like happy 4th of July messages, had a few ceremonies and whatnot for the Americans that are here.
Are what was I going to ask you? Are you happy with how the war in Ukraine is going? You know a lot about foreign policy. You've said before that you were really into it and you've read a lot about it. I disagree with you on a lot of the tactics, but are you happy with how it's going? Is there any cause for hope in Ukraine?
When you say like, it's kind of hard for me to be happy when you're reading reports about like all the death and destruction.
Right.
And there's also not any end in sight to the war in the near future. Even if Trump gets elected, I think that his plan to end it before he gets into office is very ambitious.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's achievable from like the reality I see on the ground. But he's not the only one proposing these plans. There's a lot of liberals and leftists that are proposing plans that I think are, and I'm being just as blunt as possible because I want to be honest with you. I think it's somewhat naive about like both parties and the interests that they have. For example, the Russians, a week before that peace conference the Ukrainians held in Switzerland, which was mostly them getting a framework so they can push in the future, like, hey guys, this is our peace plan. Our peace plan is good, and their peace plan respects Ukrainian sovereignty, like energy independence, a bunch of stuff that they want to see at the end of the war. A week before that happened, a week before that rally and get together, Putin released like new demands that included taking the cities of Zaporizhia and Kherson back. Now, these are territories that Russia announced that they annexed, but they then lost the city of Kherson. They were pushed back over the river. The only regional capital that they captured, they then lost. They had to flee over to the southern parts of Kherson, and they never even took the city of Zaporizhia, and that's a very big city. And they're saying that in order for them to consider any ceasefire, so to consider a ceasefire, Ukraine would have to hand over all that land, which would be roughly the size of Taiwan, if you want to calculate all that land. So quite a sizable piece of land on top of what the Russians already currently occupy, like the city of Mariupol, city of Donetsk, most of the Luhansk region, Crimea, of course. And so that demand to the Ukrainians is a non-starter. And even to Donald Trump at the debates, he even said it was ridiculous. He said, I saw their demands, and of course they're not acceptable. And so it seems to be kind of almost a universal recognition on, at least when it comes to the political class of the United States and to the vast majority of Ukrainians, that that's not acceptable. And the Ukrainians want the Russians out of the country, which obviously to the Russians, which would be a massive failure for Vladimir Putin, for both his political survival and the Russian nationalist class who believe that Ukraine belongs to them. They believe that the Ukrainians, that identity is anti-Russian in and of itself and has to be destroyed. They're, of course, not going to accept it. And so when I hear people talking about peace in the next 6 months to a year, I think it's naive and very unlikely. Not that I wouldn't want that, I just think it's unlikely.
Yeah.
As for the idea of like how is the battlefield conditions going, so I'm not hopeful about the war ending anytime soon. That's the first thing I'm not hopeful about. As for how the war's going on a tactical, strategic, like who's winning, quote unquote level, if we wanted to make it simple, I see people throwing out like very broad conclusions. I remember I saw Dave Smith recently say Ukraine is losing on breaking points. I saw some very pro-Ukraine voices recently said Ukraine's winning and the victory is guaranteed. If you look at the statistics, you can see that over time, et cetera, et cetera. I think anybody telling you either of these things right now are lying to you. They're concluding things that they cannot conclude. They're concluding if you're pro-Ukraine and you're saying that Ukraine's going to win right now, what you're saying is that the Western support is guaranteed, that it's going to keep coming.
Right.
And so in 2 to 3 years in the future that it's going to take for the Russians, or however long it's going, probably in that time frame, is going to be another 2 years or something along that length. If you were to have me guess, and let me just say it's literally a shot in the dark, you're betting on that consistent support. So you're betting on like electoral outcomes, you're betting on political outcomes,
Yeah.
You're betting that if Trump wins, that the Russians don't make a deal that's suitable enough for him, so he keeps supporting. There's a bunch of things that you have to assume on that front. You also have to assume that the Ukrainian government does certain things on mobilization, goes through with it properly. Now, in the month of May, the Ukrainian government recruited more people than they did in the last 6 months. So there is an increased pressure from the government to mobilize people. And I know Zelensky recently announced that they had enough people for 14 new brigades. It's just a question of equipment. equipment that's already been donated to Ukraine, but still hasn't arrived. And that is a big issue. It just doesn't get a lot of attention. Is that it's like, oh, but we gave Ukraine all these equipment. The F-16 still are not in the air yet in Ukraine. And people have been talking about the F-16s forever.
Oh.
Just to show like how much time this things takes, especially when there was a 6-month delay. And so if you have these things as guaranteed outcomes, then I would say that Ukraine is in a tremendous position to whittle down the Russians as they keep slamming into their lines and have a fantastic position at the negotiating table, or to just maybe even break the Russians to a point where the Russians have to negotiate in terrible conditions, right? But on the other side of that equation, the Russians, if you're like Slava Russia, like we need to take everything. Yeah, they're the Christian leaders of the new Rome or whatever it is that makes people think that. You have to first believe that the Russians are telling the truth about their production numbers. And let's assume that they're telling the truth about their production numbers. Let's just say it's the best case scenario for the Russians. They still are not producing enough tanks to replace the tanks that they're losing at the front. They are not producing enough armored vehicles. If you believe the Russians are telling the truth completely, they're just not producing enough to last, mind you, 2-3 years down the line at the current rates of loss. And that's where people are talking about, when I hear people being more serious about the war's end, people are saying like 2 years down the line.
Wow.
So another 2, so about the same length that the war has been going on currently. Is like, but again, we're shooting on the dark on like stuff we just cannot know. So that's the first problem that the Russians face. The other problem that the Russians face is they're losing an astronomically large amount of men. The Ukrainians are losing a lot of people. It's the largest war in Europe since World War II. But the Russians are losing the upwards of like 20,000 men a month, 20 to 25,000 men a month.
That's brutal.
If you're talking about Western estimates, which is about as much as they are recruiting a month, 20 to 25,000 men a month. Now, if you're losing that much men, eventually, this is my belief. People can disagree with it, but this is my belief, and I'm separating my opinion from the fact here.
Okay.
Eventually, if those many people keep dying month after month after month after month, people are going to stop coming to that job.
Yeah.
If it's just an endless just grabbing of these people and throwing them into the front lines, as I have seen myself, which is horrific to watch, then there will be amount of people that will just stop coming, because the money only matters if you're alive. If I said, I'll give you $1 million, but you'll die tomorrow, you're not taking the money, Hank, because you're worth more than $1 million, of course, Hank. But the point is that you have to assume that they'll be able to keep these steady numbers, but not only that they'll be able to increase recruitment numbers. And the only time Putin dropped in support for this entire war was when he tried to mobilize the public the first time. And a second wave of mobilization will almost certainly come with backlash, because most of the Russian public, even if they support the war, they're apathetically supporting the war. Like, you beat those Afghans. But I'm not going over there. What do you mean? I don't want to. And there's a lot of people like that.
I'm sure.
I know people like that. I even know patriotic Ukrainians who are dodging the draft because I just don't want to shoot. I don't want to be the guy to fight. But yeah, fight the Russians.
Yeah.
So there's so many things you have to assume and know for people to say, like, this side's going to win or this side's going to win in this war. And there's a lot of myths that go around, like the idea that the Russians are indestructible. They almost talk about them as like a mythical country because of World War II. But the Russians have lost wars just within the last 30 years. Not to mention they lost to the Japanese, they've lost to the Western powers before. Depending on what government you're talking about, there's also civil war law. There's losses that the Russians can take. But there's this aura of invincibility that also, I think, affects the Western psyche, affects a lot of, even the Russian psyche, to lead them to take, I think, extremely foolish decisions like invading Ukraine. Yeah.
You remind me what you're talking about. It reminds me of a caller that I sometimes have who's really into Civil War history, the American Civil War. And he said at any point, either side could have won. It was never decisive. It was never over until it was actually over. Until we did that thing.
I think there's a few reasons why people don't look at history this way. I think some people fall into the idea, we've talked about this before, Hake. I actually remember that we had this conversation about people falling to the great man history. Like, oh, this one man grabbed history by the neck and shaped it and changed the course. There's very few instances in history where something like that actually happened. And most of the time, its power is much more complex, coming together through butterfly effect after butterfly effect, miracle after miracle, to build the civilizations that we have today. It's very rarely this one guy just like came with a lightning bolt and changed everything. I think
it had to be ripe. It had to be ripe for that man to come. Most of the time.
There's also a lot of ideological nonsense where either someone will fall into like some sort of dogma, be it like some sort of like, be it Marxist dogma, be it like ultra like nationalist dogma, be it any sort of dogma to make them like say that this was bound to. Of course, our country exists because it was always going to exist because our country is our country. You know, when you talk about like a lot of countries like Russia and they talk about Russia, they talk about it in this way. A lot of countries, the nationalists talk about it in this way, and so a lot of people view history passively as if you are just a bystander and it's just kind of going by. When really it's this almost ice skating dance, dancing on rope after rope after rope, trying to get achievements that very well at any moment could fail and everything could come down like a Jenga cards. You know, I mean Jenga cards, like a Jenga tower. So this is the dice of history still rolling, and depending on what the United States and Europe does, or what Russia does, and what decisions they and or the North Koreans and or the Chinese make, could very well change the balance of this war and how the negotiating table looks when talks eventually do come. Because all wars do eventually end with some type of conversation, even if it's through unconditional surrender grants saying, give me all your rifles and go home, you know?
And there's not always, one of the things I learned as a sophomore in high school, and it kind of stuck with me, was that in war, there's always at least one loser, and there's not always a winner. And it seems like they're both, like everybody's losing in this war.
A war is always terrible and awful and terrible for the people on the ground. And war is filled with many instances of individual loss.
Big time.
That affects families across the whole country. Of people, I've heard more than once people really upset about the fact that they open their phone and like 20 to 30 to 40% of the names in there are just no longer with them because a lot of the early volunteers who were extremely patriotic in this country, who were willing to, who saw what happened in Bucha, saw the mass graves, was like, I have to go defend my family. A lot of those people have been fighting for 3 straight years, and a lot of them died. And it has an immense effect on the country. And it's a big part of the reason when people talk about, and this is my opinion injecting here, and I do want to separate like opinion from fact. When people talk about like adding fuel to the fire, when they talk about Western aid, there's like certain decisions that I think could add fuel to the fire. For example, like the introduction of nuclear weapons, or the expansion of the use of chemical weapons, because chemical weapons are being used in this country. It's very underdocumented by the press, or undercovered. It has been documented, but I remember interviewing people like over a year and a half ago and being told this way before the Telegraph piece came out, like reporting on this. But when people talk about like adding fuel to the fire, body armor, helmets, armored vehicles that actually work and are not like old BMPs, Rochelle vehicles, Bradleys, these do end up protecting the crews better and end up saving lives. And so when I have conversations with people about this loss, this is the perspective they always want to show me as an American, because they think that we have the supplies, in a lot of ways we do, to have an impact on whether their boys come home or not, if we provide the quality tourniquets or we help them with those armored vehicles. And so I understand people's like point, like if you add more ammunition, then more shells are fired. But also if people are fighting with terrible equipment, then they're just going to die in greater numbers because they didn't have the proper things to fight their struggle. So if they're going to fight the struggle anyway, personally, my opinion, I'd rather them fight it with quality equipment. I remember, I know the difference between being in a pickup truck on the front line and being in a Canadian Rochelle armored vehicle on the front line, and it is very different.
But yeah, I mean, you and I have gone over this a couple of times, that they are enabling the war to continue, because eventually if we stopped funding it, they would have to just surrender, I think. But
Do you think surrender comes with the end of violence? Like, for example, let's say the conservatives in this country, you know,
Yeah.
there's riots that happen in this country. They're violent, people die.
right.
Let's say this is of course ridiculous, but the conservatives said to stop all the violence, we'll just do whatever the left wants. No riots, no mean lefties doing whatever the left wants. We'll just do whatever. Do you think that would end all the violence if you just empowered your political opponents as much as they wanted endlessly? Or do you think there would come a point where certain people who were bad actors, unpatriotic individuals, would say, well, now that I have amassed all this power and there's no one to oppose me, I will abuse it. And now that peace that you desired, you have neither that nor strength to protect yourself.
Yeah. I understand your point. I don't know what the answer to that is, because it just depends on the situation. There's different ways to surrender, you know. I don't know. I think that I definitely think that there's a better way to go about it than this rah Ukraine stuff, where it was just completely trendy. And you and I have argued about this trendy point before.
Let's also say, like, Ukraine isn't as trendy as it used to be, is it?
I know.
Like,
because
when
people
you
are
talk
sick of
about
it.
the left, technically, when you
They're
look at the
bored.
polling,
You know, people get bored.
People
are
are
shallow.
bored. I'll admit to people being bored.
Right.
People are bored. People are shallow. I'll admit to that. The majority of Americans still support aid. The majority of Europeans, I think it's like 75% of Europeans,
Yeah.
if you poll the continent, support aid. The countries that stood out were Italy, I think Bulgaria, and Hungary were like the ones that really stood out against Ukraine aid. But the rest of Europe broadly still supports aid to Ukraine. But the topics that dominate the news now are things like Gaza. And that's
Yeah.
not to say that it doesn't deserve attention. Of course, their human suffering deserves attention too. But the trendiness, I don't think really matters. I think the merit of continued support is what matters. And right now, support is generally still stable in the United States. Support is stable still in Europe. And it's no longer as trendy as it used to be. And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of this is because it's a really convincing argument to the majority of the public, which is Ukraine was invaded after we made an agreement with them that they'd give up their nukes in exchange for our security. We and the Russians would guarantee the security. The Russians broke that side of the agreement. They invaded in 2014. We said, whatever, we'll just play sanctions. Then the Russians invaded again in 2022. And we said, okay, that's too much. You've gone too far. Now we're going to support Ukraine. And it's a simple, I think, convincing argument to many people, especially if you can tie European security with American security, with the Europeans being our main export market, with the Ukrainians getting just subjected to so many like pretty horrific actions early on in the war, affecting the perception many people have of the Russians, which I think, you know, showed them to be, at least in the military culture, very barbaric. I think that had an effect in convincing a lot of people. Even if they're bored of it, they can still remember these things when they're asked, "Oh, the Russians invasion." I remember Bucha. People remember things like that. But Bucha's just one Bucha. There's been 100 Buchas. It's just the one that people remember.
Part of it is like me personally. I'm unconvinced about it at all because I don't know what the truth is. You know, I don't know what the real story of is in Bucha. I haven't watched any of your documentaries. I'm sorry. I gotta watch them.
It's okay.
I got to do my homework, but also like to me, like I have no effect on it anyway, so I don't even pay attention to it. I just keep on saying, "Oh, there's that trendy Ukraine propaganda." But anyway, I wanted to get to some calls. Some people want to ask you some questions.
Sure, I do want to.
Yeah.
Before I take some calls, I will say about Bucha. I went to the mass grave in Bucha.
Yeah.
I talked to many of the people who witnessed the occupation. I've seen the footage. I've seen the photographs. I am 100% positive that the Russians did murder civilians in Bucha. Now, that doesn't mean all of the stories that you've heard are necessarily true. I'm just positive that war crimes did occur in Bucha, that the mass grave is real, and it wasn't like some movie prop set. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't like rumors that get inflated and like it's spread around. Like that happens with all wars.
Right.
But I mean, the Russians did do that. And Bucha's not even the worst example. The worst example was in Izium, which was actually where we uncovered the largest mass grave in Europe since the Yugoslav genocides, with over 440 bodies in one mass grave in a small settlement of about 20,000 people. So I mean, you're talking about just that mass grave containing like what 5% of the city's population. It's absurd. But yeah, I mean, I'm just to say that those types of things certainly are happening. Not that everything you've heard is necessarily true, but that instance was certainly true.
Well, I won't deny that there are evil people and evil things happening in the world that people do.
That is true.
Yeah, so I wouldn't put it past any side to do anything, really. Let's get to some calls. I know you like talking to some callers sometimes.
Sure, why not? I love your callers. They're always very polite and kind.
Indeed. Michael in Canada is on the line here. Michael in Canada, you are live with Dylan Burns 1776, Dylan Burns TV, and Hake. What's up?
Hey, my brother from another mother. What's up, homie?
Not much. Can you hear him, Dylan?
I can hear him fine.
Okay.
So, first of all, Dylan, it's not ain't, it's eight. Just wanted to say that. And I got a question
Come
for
close
you.
to your phone. You're coming in a little rough for my taste.
Sorry, I'm coming in. Yes, what's the name of the guest?
That's even worse, man. Dylan, it's Dylan Burns, Michael in Canada. Come off of speaker. Hold on, man.
What's the name of your guest?
That's sounding better. Dylan Burns.
Okay, Dylan.
Yeah.
First of all, Dylan, I truly think you doing God's work by going there and report about it. And I got a question for you, very simple. Just want to know how it's going in Ukraine right now. How's the economy and all these things? How the people are going?
Well, the biggest issues that Ukrainians, I would say the big changes that a lot of people don't know about, I'll stick to that. The blackouts are a big issue that Ukrainians are facing.
That's wild.
The Russians blew up some electrical infrastructure, targeted the generation and some of the transition points for them to be able to trade electricity with the rest of Europe. And so that means that the country's going through a rolling, like sometimes like 12 hours a day blackout periods. And this is of a certain concern for sure, because we're about to go into the winter period. And in the winter period, it is projected that we're going to still have a lot of blackouts, which is also going to affect things like heat and other issues. And people have tried, had to deal with this somewhat before. And so I'm sure that they have some material like generators that they're going to deal with, but that's something that the Ukrainians are certainly worried about right now. Another thing about the finances of the country, the Ukrainians have a lot of economic pressure on them, with them having to do repairs to electrical infrastructure or anything that's blown up, obviously, with them no longer being able to, completely get their ships through the Black Sea unattacked or without mines trying to blow up their ships. But I will say a big victory that was undercovered in the press is that they were able to destroy the Russian blockade of the Black Sea. Once the Ukrainians and the Turks and the Russians negotiated a grain deal, after a few months, it broke down and the Russians said, we're no longer going to allow the Ukrainians to transport their goods to the Black Sea. So the Ukrainians strapped a bunch of bombs to tiny little ships with little motors in them, and then just drove them into the ships, and did it enough times that they sunk a ton of their navy. They sunk the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet. I think at this point they've sunk 30 to 40% of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, while the Ukrainians don't have a navy. It might be getting close to 50%.
You said?
Yes, about roughly 40% was the last I remember. It might be up towards 50 now, because they're actually the Black Sea Fleet had to pull back into the Azov Sea because they were getting hit so hard, and now the Ukrainians might have found a way in there as well, but we don't know for sure. Point is that the Ukrainian military spent a lot of time investing into USVs, unmanned surface vessels, like these little boat drones that they just keep ramming into the ships.
Wow.
And they're strapped up with tons of explosives. And on top of that, they've been using anti-ship missiles, the few that they can get from the West and whatever they have from their stockpiles. And there's also a problem with them not being able to dock in Crimea anymore, because if they dock in Crimea, the Ukrainians can hit them with American provided Western weapons. And so Crimea has been getting hit very, very, very hard as well. But the point is, the Ukrainians are now trading about as much as they were pre-war outside the Odessan port, meaning they've almost completely broken the Russian blockade with no navy, which I think is an amazing accomplishment.
If I'm not wrong, the Crimea War is since like 2014.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. But how are the men in Ukraine? Do you talk to soldiers, to men? How do you feel about it?
How do I feel about the men, or how do they feel?
No, how does the men feel about the war in Ukraine, the Ukrainian men?
They're tired. You know, after 2.5 years of war, anyone's going to get tired, especially the people who have been fighting not only since 2022, but I know people who have been in service now for 9, 10 years, fighting this war off and on, off and on. I mean, that's like that's like 10 to 20% of your life, or depending on how long you live, spent on the front line if you survive the war. So obviously, a lot of people are tired, but their general opinion and consensus still is that they don't really have any other choice. They don't have anywhere to retreat to. This is their home. And for a lot of the people that are fighting, they are people who have their homes occupied. In Donetsk, I know somebody, my fixer, Bogdan, his home has been occupied for a very long time, and he still very much wants to see it liberated. I know other people in service, people from Luhansk, which 98% of Luhansk is occupied, who want to see their home liberated, want to go back to their home. And so the general consensus is they still want to resist, but of course, they're extremely tired. But a lot of men that I know that are dodging the draft, the people who are not in service, some of them just don't like. There's always going to be wars. During World War II, there were draft dodgers. During this war, there's draft dodgers. Every war, there's draft dodgers. But a lot of them, when I talk to them, it's, I don't want to be chewed up. We don't have enough of the good equipment. We don't have enough of the stuff we need from overseas. And so if I go into service, I don't want to get chewed up, which is another reason why the Ukrainian government, and even the draft dodgers that I talk to, has said, like, yeah, I want Western aid, because if I do get drafted, I want to be in a good vehicle. I don't want to be in, you know, like a sedan charging at Russian lines or something.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael in Canada. It's good to hear from you, man. Nice questions.
Yes, I have a nice day, guys. What I wanted to say, I just wanted to say that the war is hell, and I wish everything could end right now, because when I see videos on X of soldiers getting killed by drones and all these things, they truly break my heart, because they got families and these people are gone.
Yeah.
Like, it's truly tragic, and I wish it could all end today.
Nice,
so
man.
God bless you, and have a nice day, guys.
Thank you, Michael. Take care.
God bless you.
In
Bye.
Canada. Mark in Los Angeles is on the line. Mark, thank you for holding. You're live with Dylan Burns.
Yes, sir. Thanks for taking my call, Hake.
Hey.
Yeah, before I ask my question, I just want to let him know I don't support the Ukraine. I support Russia. And I wanted to, my question is, does Dylan think if Trump is reelected, he'll solve the war in the Ukraine?
No.
At all? He won't do a better job than Biden at this?
No. I don't think... The problem for me is I think the Western leaders have generally failed at this war again and again and again at trying to deal with it. A lot of it is kind of like sitting on the fence, meaning they've had very indecisive policies. For example, Obama wanted to send Ukraine aid after Russia invaded in 2014, but they didn't want to send them lethal aid. And so what they ended up doing is they sent them radars so they could see the Russians bombing them on the screen, but then not shoot back at them, which is not, I mean, I guess that does help, but it's not what the Ukrainians needed necessary to defend themselves or to make the Russians think that they could defend themselves, which should be the first use of any weapon, is deterrence before any. That's why people talk about peace through strength, is because if you're strong, nobody wants to mess with you.
The Second Amendment.
Anyway, absolutely. It's part of the reasons why the Ukrainians want to join NATO. It's why they want a strong military, and it's why the government has been critiqued endlessly, Zelensky included, when we're talking about the Ukrainian government, for not building up their armed forces enough. But I think Western leaders didn't deal with it quite well. I don't think Obama did. I don't think Biden did up until 2022. And even then, there's still failures that I've talked about before. And I don't think Trump did. None of them, I think, made a genuine, strong effort to try to end the war or to respect previous agreements that the United States has made with Ukraine and Russia, or tried to bring Russia within the lines of the agreements we made, like the Budapest Memorandum.
Why do you support Russia, Mark, in Los Angeles?
Well, for a couple of reasons. One, Putin does not allow for homosexuality and the LGBT sickness in his country. Number
Unless
two,
it's in the army.
And number two, he's for getting rid of illegal immigrants in Russia, which is something we won't do here. But you have to remember, in regards to Trump, when he was president, Putin never invaded the Ukraine. So when you say you don't think Trump will stop the war, I would beg to differ. I think that if Trump got along with Putin, he would convince him to stop the war in the Ukraine. I don't like Zelensky. I think he's a leftist, a phony. I think he's just out for the money. And all the money that we gave to the Ukraine could have rebuilt this country. We could have built a wall at our border instead of your country's border. We could have made America great again if we hadn't spent all that money on the Ukraine.
Interesting, man.
Well,
go ahead.
Let me just say, under that logic, technically, if Russia was to invade the United States, that would be a good thing. Because in the United States, homosexuality is allowed. In the United States, we're certainly not as conservative as the Russian government. And, I mean, that would come with all the consequences. Freedom of expression, that's dead. The First Amendment would be a stupid idea in the Russia that you're respecting. The Second Amendment, fucking terrible idea.
Oh,
you
sorry,
think the
kids.
peasants deserve to have rifles against Mother Russia? You think that all of them have a constitutionally mandated right, including the opposition of the government? Terrible. That's a terrible idea. You think you actually deserve a vote? Hey, in the United States, we had a presidential debate between two extremely old men. One who lied every minute and 20 seconds, the other who fumbled on his words every second of every minute. But hey, at least we had a presidential debate. You want to know why there was no presidential debate in Russia? Because the opposition was shot, thrown off a window, or from the roofs. So if homophobia matters so much to you and not liking the gays, that makes you oppose a country that's trying to democratize and westernize and develop the things that I think that are great about the United States, then I think fundamentally that we just have different values. I stand on Americanism and you can stand on Putinism. That's fine, but we just have totally different values on that front. As for Donald Trump ending the war, well, let me just say quickly on that. The war went on during the Trump presidency. He didn't really pursue ending it whatsoever. He didn't change the status quo whatsoever. It just kept the same silent, ongoing bloodshed. And so if he wasn't able to find a deal during those 4 years, I don't know how he's going to find a deal in a much worse situation with the war ongoing as it is. Even
there
if
was
I
no
conceded...
war under Trump. Putin didn't
There was a war under
Ukraine
Trump. There was still a war. Yes, he did.
Elected.
He did. They bombed
Biden
New York and Ukraine
and
multiple times during the Trump presidency. That happened. It's well documented. Did you know that the Russians would bomb New York every 9/11? As a joke?
No, they haven't. I didn't hear that.
No, they did.
And
They did. New York, Ukraine. They would bomb them in the Donbass region as a joke on 9/11.
That's kind of funny, honestly. Shout out to New York.
Audience, anybody in the audience can check. Putin did not invade the Ukraine till Biden was president.
And he did it when Obama was. But he did it in during Obama.
Yeah, he invaded during Obama, but during 4 years, there was still bombings, there were still deaths, there was still explosions. The war was largely frozen, but the war and occupation continued. I mean, like, nobody's going to get...
Do you think...
It continues
Biden. Let me jump...
It froze under Trump.
Let me jump in and ask, all of the Russia election interference subversion propaganda, did that sabotage Trump's relationship with Putin, where he had to play tougher than he might have? He had to play, he wasn't able to have a good relationship with Putin?
I don't think the problem is having a good relationship with Putin. I think that's why Obama failed as well. I think Trump had the same failure of the Obama administration, the same failure of the early Biden administration, is they were treating the Russians as if they were childlike, as if they didn't know what was really good for them, and we were just going to eventually like guide them towards Westernism and democracy, and that we all have the same interests at the end of the day, and this isn't really about them believing that Ukraine doesn't exist or that they have a right to Ukraine. This is just the shivers of somebody developing post-Soviet, and none of it was true. None of it was true. They invaded Chechnya and we didn't do anything twice. They invaded Georgia and we did nothing during the early Obama administration. They invaded Ukraine in 2014 and the worst we did was sanctions. And then after the next 8 years, when the Russians moved their army into Ukraine multiple times illegally, which has been documented by open source intel, we continued to say, oh, woe is me. We don't even want to send the Ukrainians a single bullet, because that'd be too offensive, even though we all signed the same document saying after Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons for the good of the world, for the good of us, and gave them to the Russians, their borders would be protected. We did nothing until 2022 to really deliver on that promise. And Trump also didn't deliver on that promise.
Trump what?
Trump also didn't deliver on that promise the United States made, and he's a representative of the United States and the commitments it made before him.
Well, then why? Let me ask you a simple question. Why does Zelensky and company want Biden to stay in power? Because they know Trump is going to end this extortion racket. What
do you mean extortion racket?
Known for money laundering. That's their big deal, money laundering.
What do you mean they're known for money laundering?
Country.
Okay, that's another thing.
Right?
Let's talk about the money thing you
country.
said. It is not true that you could take all the money we gave to Ukraine and use it to build a wall on our southern border and fix all the problems in the United States. Most of what we've given to Ukraine is not money. It is either A, contracts to defense companies in the United States that hires Americans, or B, old Vietnam-era war equipment. The majority of American vehicles I've seen in this country are M113 troop carriers, and I've seen dozens and dozens and dozens of these things. These things are worth maybe like a few $100,000, maybe $1 million a pop, and are very old, and we wouldn't use for our own soldiers because we would think it was not protected enough. And I just don't believe that if we melted all these things down, that we would get enough scrap metal to fix all of America's problems. They would have sat in our storage facilities forever, and then we would have paid to destroy them. And then our taxpayer dollars would have not seen them shipped overseas to defend an ally we made commitments to. It would instead be paid to destroy valuable equipment that's needed on the front line of a major war, the largest one in Europe since World War II.
There was, I believe, and Hake, you might be able to know, how many, was it $100 billion that we've given to the corrupt Ukrainian government since this clown Biden has been president? Okay, it says $100 billion. It doesn't say $100 billion worth of equipment.
That's what it is. That's what it is. That is what it is, though.
Why should we give you anything?
You just read the headline.
Why should we give you anything?
You just read the headline. Well, there's a bunch of reasons. I think, for one, when the United States makes a commitment, we should stand by our word, and we shouldn't act like snakes or weasels or backstabbers. And that if we were to abandon the Ukrainians at this point, we would look like, to the entire world, whether you like it or not, like snakes and weasels who backstabbers, who sold the Ukrainians a false bill of goods to give up their nuclear weapons and then let them get destroyed by the largest country in the world who signed the agreement with us. And we told them that they would respect it after we made them give those weapons to the Russians, which the Russians are using to bomb them right now. So I think that's one reason, our international reputation. But wait, I have other reasons, but we can stay there. Okay. You don't buy that? You don't think we'd look like weasels?
No, not necessarily. There's ways to deal with it. Go ahead, Mark.
I could care less what the rest of the world thinks of us. Their people are dying to get here. So I don't care what they say about us. And if it means
Swedes are not dying to get here, Finns are not dying to get here.
Money to the Ukraine to beat Russia, so be it. And if Trump gets in, he's going to stop this thing. Putin respects Trump. He respects Trump. Nobody.
I don't think he respects Trump. I don't think he respects Trump.
Using Biden.
Really, man?
Biden borrowed millions from the Ukraine, him and his son, and now he's in debt. Now he has to pay back.
He's not in debt to Ukraine. I have no clue where you're getting this from.
But answer this, Ukraine is known to be quite corrupt. It's almost as corrupt as Russia, or maybe more, right?
Not more. It's not more. I mean, it's about as corrupt. The corruption, if you check corruption indexes, it's been improving year over year. And part of the reason I think it should join the EU.
Go ahead.
But this is the problem, by the way. If we're talking about Ukraine so corrupt, and we're also saying Russia's corrupt here, I just want to say to our friend, to be clear, you support corrupt, anti-democratic, free speech hating, Second Amendment hating Russia. Okay, just to be clear, that's what we're doing.
No, you're talking about the Ukraine. You meant to say Ukraine. Go ahead.
That made no fucking sense whatsoever.
Hey, don't cuss on the. This is children's friendly.
I'm sorry.
He can't help it. He's a Zoomer, kids.
That made zero sense to me whatsoever.
He wants the Ukraine to be liberal, and with the LGBT nonsense and everything else of our bad side, he wants the worst of America.
I'm anti-mass grave. That's my first position.
To be the future.
I'm anti-mass grave.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mark. I got to keep it moving. Good to hear from you.
But the corruption
Great
thing.
Call.
The corruption thing.
Yeah.
Russia is more corrupt than Ukraine on any corruption index that you measure it on. And part of the reason I want Ukraine to integrate with the EU is because the EU has pretty stringent corruption standards. So do a lot of the organizations that Ukraine wants to join and integrate itself with the West. In fact, NATO just said that they want Ukraine to improve on its corruption issues if they want them to join the organization. And Ukraine has been making, not fast as it should be, moves in the direction to try to deal with this issue, whether it be the purges of the recruitment heads when that scandal came out about people being paid off. But there's still scandals like the hostile military administration. But the idea that the tanks or the weapons that we're sending over there are getting like sold off. I know Vivek Ramaswamy said something like that. I know a lot of other people have said stuff like that. There has been no documented evidence of that happening. And again, if the issue is you don't want to see money sent over, the main thing they're asking from the United States is weapons. It's the Europeans that are providing the vast majority of the financing.
Shameful. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Mark, man. I got to end.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I have some super chats to read in addressing Dylan.
Can I ask you, Hake? Can I ask you a question, Hake?
Yeah.
Does that not, like, anti-Americanism scare you at all?
No.
Like, when somebody's
Mark
like...
No. Mark is very pro-American. He's just old school American.
It doesn't sound like it to me. But what old school American isn't, you don't get to have elections. Old school Americans isn't like freedom of speech is a lie and you don't get to have that. Nobody can criticize the government or you go to prison.
That part is not what he named, though.
Like in Russia,
you named bad things about Russia that probably are true.
Yeah, but the things that he was defending about Russia was just like they're homophobic.
That's your word.
That's the thing. Okay, they don't like the gays. To be clear, if you say in Russia being gay is okay, you can go to prison. If you are in Russia and you present anything as like being homosexual as a positive in any manner, that can go with prison time.
That's going to go away pretty soon, I bet.
That has included people. Why would that go away anytime soon in Russia?
Because worldwide, the culture is swaying in favor of the gays.
Russia's going in the opposite direction.
You think so?
I think they're rating gay. They're raiding gay clubs. They're shutting down all LGBT rights organizations.
But listen to that. Listen to me. That's the last gasps of trying to preserve Christian morality. They're gonna. Those are like the boomers or the the people who came before the boomers were more an edifice, a face of morality, and then the boomers let it all hang out. So the generation behind them is going to let it all hang out. I don't think that Russia's going to be able to hold on to the morality.
It's the Russian government that are passing these laws.
Yeah, the government's going to get replaced. The government's going to die.
Okay, when the Putin regime collapses, maybe then there'll be an environment for change. But it's also very cultural in Russia.
Right,
They very, very much don't like homosexuality. But the criminalization of any active... Is that really so good that you can lock up somebody for just being a little too gay and saying that it's okay? That's more valuable, and that means you'll support them in invading a neighboring country over that country trying to democratize, get rid of corruption. Like if the Russians win in Ukraine, they're not going to replace them with like anti-corruptive. They're going to install some of the most corrupt people in the world. In fact, you can see in occupied territory, like Denis Pusilin, they're like literal con men that are getting established. Some, like the head of the Crimean occupation, his private military company actually bombed us on an aid mission. He's literally tied up with the mafia. Like he's been involved in like assassinations of like, it's like very open. And so when somebody comes in here, it's like, well, I know that they don't like the gays and I don't like the gays. Therefore, I support them in a war. That makes no sense to me. If you don't like the gays, guess what? The main insult on both sides of this war is the F slur. They call each other the F slur all the time. They both sides of this war are largely homophobic. Ukrainians are less homophobic than the Russians. They have progressed to be like, hey, I don't think you should be arrested for being a homosexual, but I don't think that is so valuable that you should back an army that's filled mass graves and is trying to stomp out another nationality. I think that makes no sense. I think that's anti-American. Americanism isn't I support occupation because the gays are so bad. That makes no sense.
Well, there's a lot of propaganda that has been happening for maybe 10 or 15 years about how Putin is openly Christian, or at least openly putting a face of Christianity.
He murders Christians.
Right, fair enough.
His militias have murdered evangelicals and Baptists specifically.
No, I know, but let me just finish this point. There's been this propaganda.
When people say he's pro-Christian, he's pro-Russian Orthodox Church. And the church they've embedded with spies and is a branch of the Russian government. They're pro-empowering the Russian government. They're not pro-Christian. If they were, they wouldn't be murdering Christians.
But us normal boomers, like Mark and I, don't know anything about the specifics of what's going on in Russia and how badly people are being treated. We just know that in America, they're pushing the gay thing down everybody's throats, and they're pushing illegal aliens down our throats. And then we see this propaganda, these memes about how Putin is not going along with the gay thing and not allowing the illegal aliens so much. And so it's like, oh, man, wish we had a leader like Putin. That's all he means. So it's not that he's for all that stuff that necessarily.
But he said he supports the Russians.
Yeah, I'm not with him on that because I don't know.
Sense to me.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics about Russia.
It'd be one thing for you to be like, I don't like homosexuality. That's one thing. But to project your domestic political concerns onto another country as to engage in the largest war in Europe since World War II, based purely on the fact that they looked really cool in all the based memes you see on the internet, is like the worst the internet has to offer.
I'm not saying that that's why Marx. Maybe I slipped and said that that's why Marx said it, but that's why I am like, Putin. Don't you wish we had a leader like Putin? And I jokingly say that just because of the contrast in the domestic issues. But you're right. I don't know the specifics, and I'm not supporting Putin or Russia in the war.
I'm sure if Mark knew that about like the evangelicals who were killed, or the Baptists who had the churches destroyed to be replaced by military bases. Like if he knew these stories, and I've talked to these Baptists myself. I've talked to Gennady Makhnenko about the treatment of like other denominations of Christianity and how they were treated by the Russian Orthodox Army, who was well known for the abuses of religious minorities in occupied territory. That's not even talking about what they did to the Muslims in Crimea. It's just, for me, when I hear someone say, oh, they're a warrior of Christianity, what I'm hearing is like, this is what the Russians said and put on social media, and you see the memes, and it's like the vibes are rubbing off on you. Because unless you're a Russian Orthodox Christian, if you're any other type of Christian, you would be getting negative treatment in occupied territory by many of these militias.
Fair enough. I got to read a few super chats, and then we'll get back to calls, man. Interesting discussion. Shout out to Mark, too. Over on buymeacoffee.com/the Hake Report, Manuel bought 5 coffees and then 3 more saying, ask Dylan if he knows where Zelensky was born.
He's from Kyiv. It's a city in southern Ukraine. Yeah.
Manuel says Miami, Florida. Had you ever heard that before?
I have never heard this before, but he's from the southern city of Kyiv, from everything I know. Maybe he was born in Miami. I don't know his specific birth hospital,
okay,
but I know what city he grew up in.
So maybe he's an anchor baby in America.
Maybe. Let me look. Zelensky birthplace. I'd be curious.
Hassan says he was born in Philly. No,
it says Kyiv, place of birth.
Well, I mean, they say stuff about where Obama was born too, but we won't go there. Kale gave a super chat on Streamlabs. Question for Dylan. If Trump were to end the war before his inauguration, what would be your reaction, and would it change your perspective on the war?
It might. It would depend on how he ended it. If he was able to end it on terms that I think will actually, end the war. Because the worst case scenario for me, from my perspective, the thing that scares me more than anything else, is that we make a deal, and it's a ceasefire, and then the Russians start the war again in 4 years, because it was just like, okay, we can rebuild our army, and then we can go again. Yeah. Where the Americans are distracted with Taiwan, or the Americans are distracted with Mexico, and once they're distracted and their munitions are elsewhere, then we can take advantage and push on the Europeans, who are scrambling to try to build up the defense sector, which they've ignored for quite a long time. So to me, it would depend upon a deal being made, but which guarantee that the Russians will not invade the Ukrainians again, i.e. some unilateral defense pact, multilateral defense pact. NATO membership would be the most clear-cut thing, because it's the thing that's worked for everyone else, but I'm not married to it. If there's something else that could be written.
Because didn't they have an agreement that NATO wouldn't expand? Wasn't that like kind of a big issue to Putin? NATO should not expand.
The Russians say that Gorbachev made a deal with the West during the collapse of the Soviet Union to stop the expansion of NATO past East Germany, which is what people say. What was signed at that agreement was that there would be no Western NATO military bases in a reunified Germany in East Germany, to make a barrier in East Germany between the Soviet Union and NATO before the Soviet Union's collapse. There was no agreement on paper. Now, there's some people who say verbal. Gorbachev said that there wasn't a verbal agreement, and he's the guy who did it, so I don't know. I believe him. He also flip-flopped on this, though, so who knows? Yeah. It could be that politics are making people, talk about previous agreements, about things that were maybe talked about but not agreed to. The point is, it's not official. It's all rumor.
If you were
the only
Putin,
thing that we know for sure is that it was East Germany, no bases there.
If you were Putin, would you want NATO? I mean, Ukraine in NATO?
Probably not. No. In 2002, he said it wasn't a problem if Ukraine joined NATO. But also,
was that when he was thinking that he might join?
Sometime around that. It might have been a little bit after that.
Yeah.
The problem is that the relationship between NATO and Russia changed rapidly, and and I think a lot of it, and I'm just being blunt here, is that the Russians gained more power so they could be more verbally like, okay,
aggressive.
We're going to start reasserting control here. Because like 6 years after they said Ukraine could join NATO, they invaded Georgia, right? So that's not a lot of time between when he was saying this and he was invading Georgia and complaining about NATO expansion.
Oh, by the way,
I do think he wouldn't like it.
Right.
But I would also ask, how else could we guarantee the Russians don't invade again? Because honestly, like Finland joined NATO, and that was something that should be terrifying to the Russians because that doubled NATO's border with Russia. But all they've done since
Finland
then
is Finland is harmless. Finland doesn't want to hurt anybody, you know.
They had a vicious war. The Finnish Soviet War was horribly vicious, and the Russians lost so many guys trying to invade Finland.
Oh, so I'm wrong.
Many men.
Oh, okay.
And then there was the
Finland's nice
war
now,
after
right?
that. Right now the Russians are, and this is crazy because the guy was just talking about how great Russia is on illegal migrants. They're taking illegal migrants and throwing them at the Poles and the Finns. And what I mean by that is that they're taking illegal migrants, they're giving them bikes, and then they're saying, go to Finland, go to Poland, they'll deal with you. The Belarusians are doing this too.
That's funny.
And this has led to the death of some Polish soldiers who were stabbed to death by these people. And this is a really divisive issue right now. And then, of course, there's a fact, like a lot of these people go all the way to Russia because they were told they could get help. And then they're there and they're like, never mind, go that way. And then they go that way, and there's these people trying to get a better life, and it's a really tragic situation all around.
You mentioned that it sounded like you were saying Russia played weak with NATO, played nice, like they wanted to join them, and played like they were getting along until they got power. And so
it's not just that. It's just, but I do think
that's part of it, right?
Obviously, as they got more, I think it's part of it that when they were less powerful, they were less assertive. Yes.
So make sure that. I want a promise from you today that when you guys take power in America and you put all of us in the gulags, that you make my gulag nice and not too nasty.
You will get 2 bowls of gruel. Everybody will get only 1 bowl of gruel. You will get 2 bowls of gruel
and the snake pit,
a half moldy piece of bread,
including Mark from Los Angeles. Let him get.
I will allow not Mark, but I will allow you to choose between the snake pit and the scorpion pit.
Oh, I call my live chat the snake pit. They're my snake pit.
No. But you get to choose between your gulag torture.
Okay. All right. Another super chat from Lin Yen Chin, who says Dylan burns his IQ. It's a pun there. Dylan burns his IQ away in forming the ivory towers of vanity that make up his persona as a mere mouth breather, incapable of sensing misuse of syntax. Fix your alignment of spine and learn how to breathe. Focus. Are you a nose breather or a mouth breather, Dylan Burns?
I like to think that I breathe out of my nose.
Okay. All right. Well, fix your spinal alignment and don't get lost in vanity in your ivory towers.
I'm sorry. It's too. I am lost in the ivory tower.
Lin Yen Chin is actually kind of deep. I didn't fully comprehend it, but it is. He has fair points. He's a great guy. Shout out to Lin Yen Chin.
I didn't understand it really either, but I'm sure they're right.
Yeah, something to consider for sure.
Yes.
Connor's a first-time caller in Iowa. Connor, thank you for calling, man. What's up? You're live with Dylan Burns. We have 15 minutes, so I'm going to go just a couple of minutes each caller so that I can get to all of you guys. Make your point real fast. Your question. Go ahead.
Perfect. Yeah. So for Dylan, why do you think that Ukraine isn't really covered in the West? Certainly not as much as Israel-Palestine is. And where in the world do you think Ukraine is covered a lot in the media? I'm assuming in Eastern Europe. I just wanted to get your thoughts on a quick reason why. And yeah, thank you.
I think it's a few things. I think one of it is that Israel-Palestine is more recent news, obviously. This is the most basic answer, is that this more recent news, therefore it's not as fresh in many people's mind. And it's also one of the more like divisive issues already internationally known. So while Ukraine, in a way, the war in Ukraine almost introduced itself to the world really not for the first time, but on the biggest stage ever in 2022. And most people didn't know much about the Ukrainian story. If you ask people about like Taras Shevchenko and like Ukrainian poets and historians and like their history of struggling for freedom, whatever, most people have no clue. And Zelensky, in a way, acted as ambassador to a lot of people of Ukraine at the start of the war. And that's one thing a lot of people give him credit on. And even his biggest critics in this country, including me when I critique him, will say that he was a very good spokesperson for the country in trying to explain at least the bare bones of that. But Israel, everybody knows about Israel-Palestine. It's the most known divisive issue in the world. It's got like 70 to 80 years of history that's pretty well documented and known about. There's also a religious angle in Israel-Palestine, especially in the United States when it comes to evangelical communities and communities that are historically supportive of Israel, including American Jews, where most Americans don't have really much of a religious tie to Ukraine.
Yeah.
Like the Russian Orthodox Church like divide stuff most Americans don't know about. It's an interesting issue, and I do plan to make something about it eventually, but it's just not something that garners religious ire as much. And not to mention, like, the Israel-Palestine issue is also at the center of like the Muslim world's ire specifically, which makes up a very large portion of the world. And in a way, this war also has those two worlds clash. Now, there's a bunch of other reasons as well, but those would be like the immediate reasons. I'll also say that social media has been a big player this war too. Social media, just like with Ukraine, it was a big player, but like a lot of just reposting of content, reposting of the gore, reposting of the most horrific content. Everybody's seen it if you've been on social media at this point. I think that has really dragged a lot of people. And if there's like multiple wars going on at the same time, I think that it's going to end up dragging away from it. Like, for example, like the war in Sudan gets like no attention, even though the war right now in Sudan is absolutely horrific. So I don't know how upset I can really be, because at least it's getting more attention than like Myanmar or Sudan, even though they obviously deserve attention.
Interesting. I didn't even. Like, I forgot that there even was a war in Sudan.
Yeah, the
and
RSF
Myanmar too. I barely ever hear about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dylan, thank you.
Yeah, and as for the countries it's covered more in, it's Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Yeah. They get covered the most. Germany and I think France covered a little bit more. And the UK covers it a lot. The British love Ukraine.
Oh, wow.
Huh. That is interesting. Yeah, suddenly all the MAGA people are experts on Victoria Nuland and Klitschko. So it's just frustrating. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Connor. Appreciate it, man. COLEY in Tacoma, Washington. If I'm pronouncing your name right, are you there? COLEY.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, go ahead. You're on with Dylan Burns.
Okay, perfect. I had a question about the Ukrainian military. I was in the U.S. military from 2012 to 2018, and this was kind of the first time that I was like pro-forever war, because it seems like Russia just doesn't have a back end, and they'll just keep throwing their almost infinite amount of people at a war that just seems like it can go on forever. At what point do we just say, fuck it, they have nukes, but it's worth going in and actually shutting this shit down?
Keep it clean, man. There's children listening to the show. No worries, you didn't know.
My apologies. But just coming in and shutting stuff down and saying that expansionism is no longer tolerated.
I don't think the American government, at the very least, is going to put any troops on the ground in Ukraine. I've had this position since the start. I think they're too afraid. They are like the two centers of geopolitical power with some of the largest nuclear stockpiles in the world. And so I don't think Putin or Trump or Biden or any of the people that might be president in, say, the next year are very eager to tempt with that at all. I do think that the furthest I could imagine would maybe be military trainers on the ground, but combat troops that could actually unseat the Russians, I don't think anything like that is possible unless the Russians use a nuclear weapon in Ukraine. That's the only scenario I could imagine, and even then, I don't know if it's particularly likely. And the only reason I would say then is because the calculus would change, because to some people, this would mean the Russians would have to lose, because if they win after using a nuclear weapon and they get away with it, the calculus for a lot of world leaders who have nuclear weapons like Kim Jong-un or other tin box dictators who want to take back land might think, oh, all I need is a nuke. Then I can basically act like a suicidal maniac on the world stage and say, well, if you attack me, I'll blow everything up. Now, obviously, if you want to threaten the whole world, you're going to need quite a large nuclear stockpile. The Russians actually have a stockpile to somewhat threaten that. But I think that's something that would maybe encourage the United States to take some forceful action to make sure that the Russians found consequence from using the nuclear weapon and the message wasn't sent. You can use a nuke and basically nothing will happen. Under that scenario, I could see the United States maybe destroying whatever launched the nuke at Ukraine. Let's say that it was an air base. The United States strike the air base. Or if it was used by ground troops on the front line, they'll strike those ground troops and like make it known that there'll be direct intervention by the United States or something like that. That's the only scenario I could imagine. Outside of that very narrow, very unlikely scenario, I think the only powers that are likely to deploy troops would have to be Eastern European ones or ones within Europe that have already talked about it, like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, or the French maybe, because Macron has talked about it at length.
Interesting, man. Go ahead.
I had one more question.
Real quick, real fast. Yeah, go ahead.
If Ukraine is allowed to take, if Russia is allowed to take Ukraine, and that's a win for them, isn't that also promotion of saying, okay, anywhere that's not NATO is up for grabs, and what's stopping them from retaking Russia if they win, other than we say we'll fight them. But if we're saying that, well, a fight is not anything we're willing to do because of nukes, they still will have the same amount of nukes once they have Ukraine, and then they'll have the harvest power and the economy of Ukraine at that point. So
you make an interesting point at the end there, because I think some people I hear like, well, the Russians have done so bad in this war. Who matters if they win? They've shown how weak they are. But number one, the Russians have adapted a lot during this war. I've seen them improve when it comes to the response time of their artillery, when it comes to how they've integrated drone warfare. And they're the only country of maybe two, the other one being Ukraine, who have fought a war like this in the 21st century now. The United States hasn't had to fight a war like this large and mechanized since what, the invasion of Iraq? And this war is nothing like the invasion of Iraq. The drones were not available like they're available now. A bunch of elements are just not available like they were available then.
And Iraqis didn't have a chance of coming to the U.S. when we were fighting them.
They didn't even have a chance of beating the Americans, really.
Yeah.
Now,
you can walk from Russia to Ukraine. You can't walk from Iraq to the U.S.
And then when you add Ukraine, right, as part of Russia, on top of all of the skills they're building now, they get the population of Ukraine. They get their now expanded military industries. They get all of this, like a lot of the drone production that Ukraine has done very well. A lot of the drone experimenting, they're on the cutting edge of this type of drone technology now. When it comes to like this quick, usable, like one after the other FPV drone attacks, they're going to get all of that. They're going to get all of their agriculture, all of their mines, all of their industry, and that's going to be on top of a now revitalized nationalist Russia that just won the largest war in Europe since the Second World War. And what's right next to Ukraine? Moldova, a country that Russia already has troops illegally stationed in Transnistria, and is also a country that Russia has invested a lot of money to try to capture the politics of, with Moldovan politicians literally caught carrying bag loads of cash given to them by Russian agents. And so I do think that if the Russians really just full out won this war, they would see this as like being rewarded for good decision making. Yeah, they can, maybe they'll completely buy their own hype, and I think they'll keep going. Whether they'll move into a NATO country, I think will be dependent upon how strong Article 5 is, whether it's been whittled down, because I've heard some talk about the restructuring of NATO and how that's going to work, and that does have me somewhat concerned about the future of the organization and its ability to deter further eastward expansion, especially into Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, which the Russians are going to say they need in order to have proper access and sea dominance in the Baltic Sea region. Definitely considering Sweden and Finland just joined NATO.
Thank you, COLEY in Tacoma, Washington. I got to run, man. It's good to hear from you. Take care, man.
Have a great day.
All right, you as well. Oh, man. We got to wrap up pretty soon here. Let me get to Hector in New Mexico. He has a question on Ukraine. What's up, man? Hector.
What's up, Hake?
Hey.
I was going to originally ask Dylan a question on Ukraine, but I'm getting tired of all this Ukrainian talk. So
understandable.
Instead, so this is for Dylan. So, Dylan, why do you think the homeless population seems to be increasing in the U.S., and what's the best solution you have to solve it?
I love it.
Man, it's I think some of it probably almost certainly has to do with housing prices and not enough availability of homes, and therefore with the smaller markets, less amount of homes, housing prices for the available properties go up. This is an issue in New York. This is a big issue in places like LA. So I think availability of homes help bring the prices down so people don't have to live out of their vans. I think that's one issue. I think another issue is drug abuse. Drug abuse is a terrible, terrible thing. The reason my mom was homeless was because of drug abuse, and it's something that puts a lot of people on the street. It doesn't only like take up all your money, because the addiction then takes away your rent, takes away everything else. It becomes your main focus. It becomes your everything. It dominates your perception. It dominates your life. Every waking moment can become either you being high or you trying to find your next high, scrounging around in the middle of the night trying to figure that out. And if that's what you're doing, not only are you going to spend all your money on it, you could lose your job, your psychological profile begins to break down, and you start to become like a lot of the people we see on the street today. And you start to see them slowly decay mentally. And it's very sad. It's not only that, there's also just a lot of people who, maybe their parents die and then they don't have anyone to take care of them, and they're mentally already messed up, and therefore they end up homeless, and they could have certain like tendencies that mean it's harder for them to get into traditional mental health care facilities. Or elsewhere, or they could just not have the resources. I think it's a bunch of things that put people on the street. Some of it is just, of course, and this is always true, people just down on hard times, losing a job that they held forever because the company went under or else otherwise. But a lot of those people, and this is hard to say, are transitionally homeless. I was transitionally homeless for a very short period of time after like a family dispute, but I got a job after like 10, 15 days, was able to find a new place to live. But for the people that we're talking about before, those are people that are going to need some societal solving, some societal problem solving. These are not people that can help themselves, in large part.
Do you think that there is do you agree with me that they are enabling it and encouraging it, and that's what's also expanding it? They're enabling the homeless by feeding them and stuff like that?
No, I don't think that they're enabling the homeless to be homeless by feeding them, especially if we're talking about people who have like psychologically broken down. Because once your mind is everything but drugs, like it's impossible to explain this to somebody who hasn't been high or hasn't seen somebody in this state before. They will lie to the most beloved family member if it means it can get them back to that nirvana, or if it can get the shakes to go away. And when that's your main focus, you don't think about food, you don't think about housing a lot of times. Like this, it can dominate everything, all of your perception. When it gets really, really bad, these people, if they're not given food, or if they're not able to beg for food, they will simply starve to death, and maybe not even be able to tell they're starving to death. Which that's how you get like these skeleton drug addicts. It's so no, I don't. I think
they're even enabling drug taking though, right?
Even in the back times of the most like 1,000 years ago, when you're talking about like Christian settlements in Europe, when everyone was like monks and they had the shaved head, you get the idea. Church bells and wooden communities. Even then, the church had funds, if it was a good church in the community, to help people who were in this state, at least to some capacity. I just also believe that we've evolved past that it's not just literally giving them 2 pence to eat, or just like a little like dirt plot to help. So I don't think that it's just enabling them. I think that it's necessary for these people to survive, or
they're
have
giving
some
them
sort of dignity in life.
They're giving them both food and drugs. Would you support sorry, Hector, I'm stepping all over your call. Would you support?
No, go ahead.
Would you support mandatory volunteer labor?
I don't know what that means.
Slavery.
No, I would not.
Could we put the homeless in slavery on some level until they work their way to their functioning?
I'm not a big. I don't know if that would. Do you want a crack addict working for you during withdrawal systems? No, you don't want a crack addict.
No, I know, but at least you have to kind of force them to. That's why you have to be like a There has to.
For example,
a slave
like giving them
driver is
drugs.
not an easy thing.
Like giving them drugs. I don't think you should be giving people who are not addicted to heroin.
Yeah.
I don't think you should be giving anybody these types of things. But if, and this is an exception that I do need to give, if somebody's going through withdrawals, the withdrawals can literally kill you. If you've been deep in heroin, deep in these drugs, and you just go completely cold turkey, it can quite literally kill you.
I've heard that.
So in order to get them off of heroin, you're going to have to give them at least small doses of something to keep them alive, you know?
Last word, Hector. I apologize. I was wrong.
No, it's cool.
Go ahead.
That's cool. So one last thing. So it's fair to say that there is an opiate crisis in America. So with that being said, I do believe that a lot of people here are enabling the homeless and their drug abuse. I believe that they are enabling it, and they're making it too comfortable for these people, and they're causing a lot of businesses to suffer along the way.
True.
And so if we were to make them uncomfortable, do you think that would solve, you think that would cause them to want to better themselves and making them a little bit more comfortable to be camping out in parking lots or and smoking fentanyl when people are in the drive-through and they're like 10 feet away from these people and you can smell what do you think that would help?
The problem I have with just like the solution being like just make their life shittier and eventually they'll better themselves is that for some people, I'm
Go ahead.
I really do apologize. It just comes out. It's like raised like a sailor, I guess. Oh gosh. The first problem is probably they just move. A lot of times if they get really bad treatment, either if they're beaten by like bum bashers or if the government like just brings in like the bulldozers and pushes them out, they'll just move on to another city. And so unless you had some like sort of federal policy to make them everywhere they go, it'd just be absolutely terrible for them to live. And then what would happen? There would be a certain amount of people that just go live in the woods forever, I guess. And that's where they're gonna like come out every once in a while into the urban communities. I think that a better solution than having them all camp out in front of businesses, especially if they're in a deteriorated mental state and high on drugs, would be getting facilities where these people could go. And if they repeatedly show themselves to be a danger to the public, obviously, then it could be less than voluntary for them to go to facilities, get treatment, receive some sort of help. I'm not saying round up everybody. I'm saying for specifically those who are like have knives, they're high on like the people who are completely like almost too far gone. But I really don't think that just making their lives shittier, I just can't, making their lives worse is going to solve the problem. I really don't.
I'm so glad you brought this topic, Hector, in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I got to run, man. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, too.
Yeah. Dylan Burns, I have to wrap up. William in California, I cannot get to you. He wanted to ask or talk about how Biden got in office. And the rest of the callers and super chatters, I'll have to get to you tomorrow. Dylan Burns, I forgot to tell you Happy White History Month. It's White History Month as well.
My goodness. Fantastic. So you're going to be doing an episode on Ukrainian white history, yes?
This was part of it, yeah. It's a shame that a lot of white Jews, a lot of white Ukrainians, a lot of white Russians, a lot of white / Arab. Arab is white, right? Palestinians are becoming history, and it's terrible. And in Myanmar and in Sudan, white Sudanese.
Yeah, all the white people, all the white Sudanese.
Tell the people how to get to you, man. I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for making it happen.
I'm always love coming on. If people want to check out my stuff, I'm releasing films at Dylan Burns TV. YouTube doesn't like footage of wars, so if you search it up, you're going to have to scroll down a bit to see my channel. If you want to subscribe there, hit the notification bell. I'll be releasing that footage on the BMP in the very near future. Also have some documentaries there about like the artillery war in Ukraine, some war crimes that I documented if you wanted to see that. For daily commentary stuff, if you want to hear my libtard takes, you can check it out at Dylan Burns Live on YouTube. And you can follow me on Twitter, DylanBird1776.
Cool, man. Thanks again for coming on, and be safe out there in Ukraine.
Thank you very much. You have a good one, Hake.
You too. Guys, this has been the Hake Report. Catch the Fallen State.tv coming up next. Dylan Burns was on the Fallen State, by the way. You could check out that thing. JLP doesn't remember it, but I think he would remember. But in the meantime, listen to Hake News. Adios, America. catch American Anchor Baby after that, after The Fallen State. And then, of course, church with Jesse Lee Peterson on Sunday. And callers and the rest of the super chatters, I'll get to you first thing on Monday. Hopefully I'll be there. Bye.
Don't take the bait. You know they are fake. Just stop and wait. You could see the hate. There's no debate. Listen to Hake News.
Peace in the Middle East and in Ukraine. Bye.